This is Gala Avery reporting to you about this week at the Video Archive Cinema Club, the 20-seat secret cinema located within the Vista. Today, I am joined on the airwaves by Video Archive Cinema Club manager Matt Landsman to chat about the calendar for the week of Monday, February 17th. Hey, Matt.
Hey Gala, we're recording today on a beautiful rainy day here in Los Angeles.
I know it's raining cats and dogs, and the city needs it. Let's get straight on into the movies this week. I know that on Tuesday, the 18th, we have a 2 p.m. Abbott and Costello double feature. Who Done It and Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man.
I was really looking at this week trying to find a theme because I was watching a lot of the movies this week and I was kind of feeling the sense of a theme. And I think that the theme of the week is sort of forgotten media and magic. This is like true preservation cinema week because with Abbott and Costello, did you watch these as a kid?
No, actually, I never really got into Abbott and Costello, but you're a big fan, aren't you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching them. I basically uh, we had an Abbott and Costello Meet Jekyll and Hyde tape when I was a kid, which scared me. Like the actual look of Mr. Hyde in that scared me as a small child, which is kind of ridiculous looking back on that. And I was thinking about it and how my generation might be the last to experience Abbott and Costello as children, unless people start bringing their kids to um, these showings that we're doing. Like we got to keep it alive, and it's the same with Pufnstuf, who we'll talk about later in the episode. We're sort of preserving these old comedy legends as the landscape has shifted in a different direction with comedy, but. Anyway, we have Who Done It, which feels like a bit more of a serious noir at first than the other Abbott and Costello mysteries, and it was the first one they did that wasn't a musical. So it's about these people who do radio dramas called Murder at Midnight. And as soon as it starts with like someone dies while they're on the air, and they're like doing those like radio plays. And then it all seems very serious until you meet Abbott and Costello, and you meet them and they're what's called soda jerks. They're like these guys who work as like short order cooks in a diner and they're like making these Limburger cheese sandwiches, but they're actually like aspiring radio station murder mystery writers. And as soon as they're introduced, it gets really funny and they take it on themselves to like solve the crime so they can be real life detectives and get their like radio plays heard on the air. So they come into this actual crime scene and they start like bullying the investigators and like pretending to be real investigators. And what's funny to anyone watching is that the killer to me was like pretty obvious from the start of the mystery. I won't spoil it, but it's really funny. It's notable for like a Watson Volts joke, like Watts versus Volts, which they ad libbed on set, and it references the Who's on First joke, which is like probably their most iconic joke. William Gargan is in this movie as the police lieutenant, and he was notable for playing Ellery Queen in the old Ellery Queen serials, which are sort of like in line with Dick Tracy, but I don't think they're like as good as Dick Tracy. So this one, because it's not a musical, was really short. It's just over an hour long, and it's just like a funny midday murder mystery with our friends Abbott and Costello. So that is the first half of the double.
What about the second movie on the double billing?
Our second movie on the double billing is Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. And we're really into like showing the Universal Monsters canon. Obviously, we showed the Invisible Man last week on 16 millimeter, and we showed them meeting Mr. Hyde on 16 millimeter a while back, which is the one that I remember most from childhood. And in Abbott and Costello Meet Jekyll and Hyde, Boris Karloff like plays Dr. Jekyll. He originally didn't want to do this because he like didn't want to do a parody of his work, but then he ends up doing like Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. And these are technically part of the Universal Monsters catalog. So I think on the big screen we showed Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein and Meets the Mummy as well. So I think that these are just really fun. It pairs really nicely with Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. In this one, again, they play wannabe detectives, and they get approached by a boxer who was accused of murdering his manager, and the boxer takes the Invisible Man formula. So this, like, canonically exists in a world where the Invisible Man exists and that happened, the Jack Griffin character. but like when you take it, you become the Invisible Man. Like the Invisible Man is more of a concept than a character. So this boxer takes it, they get into the ring with like a crooked boxer. The Invisible Man punches the other boxer, and everyone thinks that Costello did it. So now a boxing match is arranged where Costello has to be in this boxing scenario. To me, it kind of felt like a wacky boxing movie, and then they wrote The Invisible Man into it, basically. It's notable, of course, because the effects are amazing, which were done the same way as the original Invisible Man effects, which were like a big secret. Like at Universal, they told people, like they lied in the press that it was done with a mirror trick and stuff like that. But in actuality, they would shoot the bandages, like the person with the bandaged face wearing a black belt velveteen outfit in front of a black screen, and then they would cut out the bandages and composite them onto the rest of the movie. It was one of the earliest examples of compositing in history, and they would like meticulously cut around the eye holes. So it was like this really elaborate effect that was done by Stanley Horsey, who was the son of the original effects designer David Horsley, who did the effects for The Invisible Man Returns and The Invisible Woman and The Invisible Agent, which we showed. So if you're coming to see this one, you can look forward to like really cool effects, obviously fun Abbott and Costello stuff, and just a great movie to pair with the Invisible Man, which we showed, and a movie to bring your kids to.
Yeah, I love the fact that we played The Invisible Man and now we are playing Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. It's a really nice tie-in, just that everything is connected in the cinema club. Now for the Wednesday matinee. On Wednesday the 19th at 2 p.m., we have The Idiot. Okay, so if you're just like listening to this and you don't know what this movie is, just off the name itself, I would have assumed that it's like a comedy or something, but this is actually a foreign language film.
Yes, this is a foreign language film, and it's Kurosawa sort of doing a 1950s melodrama, which was in line to me with a lot of what was coming out in America at the time, even though it's an adaptation of Dostoevsky. Apparently, Kurosawa was a big fan of the book, and he always wanted to adapt it, and it was a very difficult adaptation. His original cut of this was over 4 hours long, and the studio said, no way, basically. And they made him trim it down quite a bit against his wishes. And the end result is sort of like a piece of like lost media where like you can't see the full cut anywhere. All that footage that they cut out is just gone, like lost to the ages, tears in the rain. And you sort of have to do a lot of work to understand what's going on in this movie. And there's a lot of like interstitial title cards in this movie that kind of help you understand what's going on in the first half. It's a story divided into two halves. Here is the setup. Masayuki Mori plays a World War II veteran who gets a stay of execution, and after that, he's thrown into an asylum where he has epileptic dementia, which basically means he's going insane. So the government like deems him slow or like an idiot, as you would call it, and he has like a speech impediment. And there's only one guy who really still believes in him. It's this guy, Mr. Ono, who lives in Sapporo, who is played by Takashi Shimura of Akiru, Stray Dog, Seven Samurai, one of the like most frequent recurring Kurosawa collaborators. And they meet in like this, he meets this sort of simple peasant guy named Akama, who's played by Toshiro Mifune, of course, from Seven Samurai, on his way to Sapporo. And it's explained that Akama left Sapporo so that he could like save up to marry this girl. Now the girl who lives on the island of Sapporo is Teiko, and that's Sasuke Hara, who we have seen before in Late Spring, the Ozu movie. And she's like this kept woman of this older guy who is offering up her dowry to anyone who will marry her out of his hands because he's like abusive to her and he's sick of her. So he's offering people 600k yen. I don't know what this like translates into now, to marry off this woman. So this other guy, Kayama, is like stepping forward to marry her because he loves Mr. Ono. That's Takashi Shimura. He loves his daughter Ayaka, who's like this like sour, sort of dull woman that like no one can really crack. So the idiot Masayuki Mori, he comes to Sapporo and he falls in love with both women. He falls in love with the kept woman Takeo because she's like the only person who understands his pain and humanity and stuff. And then he also falls in love with Ayaka. And the guy who planned to marry Takeo for the dowry gets like really murderous and hateful. So his like friend becomes his enemy, and it's like a really vicious love triangle. And when they all finally meet up to show off with do a showdown with each other uh, in the second half of the movie and get to the bottom of what's going on, you're probably going to be on the edge of your seat. If you've been following this movie and able to keep up with all the machinations of this love triangle, you're going to be like, holy crap, they're finally meeting each other.
No matter what country you're in, you always have this classic story of the love triangle. Be it, and this is kind of like more like a love square, a love quadrangle, because the two guys are best friends. So it makes it like even deeper, and then they have to become enemies, which just is a delicious story device. So this one just sounds like a really good one, and a serious movie on 2 p.m. on Wednesday the 19th.
I just think that it's great that we're getting foreign language films on the calendar every now and again. Jules is a big fan of Japanese cinema, and if you've seen Ran or Seven Samurai or Yojimbo or Rashomon, we're shedding light on The Idiot and Stray Dog and other sort of underseen Kurosawa films.
Yeah, that's also the best part is that like people have seen all of the big movies, but here at the Cinema Club, we like to show you if you like this director, you might have not heard of this title, but you are going to like it. Hey, Matt, I think it is time for us to take a snack break.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And we are back from our snack break, and we ran into a few people in the lobby.
So first, we ran into Amanda, who is one of the coolest people working at Pam's Coffee, and she actually told me that her favorite thing on the menu currently was the blueberry mocha, which is technically a secret menu item.
Oh, I like that we have a secret menu item alert. So anyone listening to the Cinema Club episodes, you have a shoe-in. You now can do like your secret wink, wink, nudge, nudge that you are really a true fan of the Cinema Club by ordering yourself a blueberry mocha.
Blueberry mocha, and she said she likes to pair it with a breakfast sandwich. And then the other person I ran into was my good friend Ani Marikian, who is also your friend.
Yeah, hi Ani, we love you.
And she said she gets a brown sugar cinnamon iced latte in a brownie or birthday cake fight.
Well, you can get any of those snacks. Actually, Pam's snacks, I think, work better for the matinee shows because, you know, Pam's is open. But you can still get Pam's hot coffee behind the counter at the Vista, can't you, Matt?
That's right.
So for these evening shows, if you'd like to get yourself some Pam's, make sure to head on over to the snack bar inside of the Vista, where you can also get popcorn and those pretzel hot bites and all sorts of delicious candies that are seasonal and wonderful. Now for our first evening show of the week, on Thursday the 20th at 7:30 p.m., we have Pufnstuf. Okay, Matt, now it's my turn to ask you, did you watch this as a kid?
I did not, but apparently my mom was a big fan of the TV show HR Pufnstuf.
Yes, so HR Pufnstuf, he's your friend when things get rough. I watched this as a kid because my dad was a big fan of HR Pufnstuf. For those of you that may not be familiar with this, and we could consider this like lost media, maybe. I don't know if I would go that far because it still has, you know, its dedicated cult following. But this is a Sid and Marty Krofft TV show that came out in 1969, and it was actually the first independent live-action puppet show. So it predates Sesame Street by a mile. And the movie has the same cast as the TV series. So we have Jack Wilde, who you may know from lots of movies that have like little British children in them, like example, Oliver. He plays Jimmy, who has been transported to this magical world and has a friend that is a dragon, who is the giant, Pufnstuf, HR Pufnstuf.
I can't believe he's a dragon.
Yeah, he's a dragon. Isn't that funny? He doesn't really look like a dragon,
No,
but
he
he is a
doesn't.
dragon. And he has a witch as an enemy. And I love the witch's name, Wilhelmina W. Witchy-Poo. That just kind of feels like that's me on a Wednesday. But the movie is directed not by Sid and Marty Krofft, obviously, but the movie is directed by Hollingsworth Morse, who also has a name that sounds like it comes straight out of a storybook. And Matt, the other movie that he directs around this time, which I think is kind of funny, is Daughters of Satan.
Wow.
So he's directing Pufnstuf, which is like a children family movie, and then he's going off to go do Daughters of Satan. So he must have just been one of these like British directors that was just like a workhorse and just doing whatever story that he felt comfortable doing. Now, I thought this was interesting that this ended up getting screened on an evening show, because I would have typically thought that Pufnstuf would have played in the afternoon.
Well, I think that Jules, who chose this, really wanted to give him the primetime spot so as many people could see Pufnstuf as possible.
And I also think that the majority of Pufnstuf enthusiasts, which there are lots, tend to be in the age range that would go to an evening show. Like, you grew up watching this in the late 60s, early 70s. You vaguely remember the character Pufnstuf. I just know the song has been sung to me by my dad throughout my entire childhood. It is, for those that might not be familiar with the character, you might think that he's kind of weird looking and maybe a little off-putting, but for me, it is like a comfort movie. I feel so comfortable. I love Pufnstuf. I love the relationship that he has with Jimmy. I love the witch enemy, Wilhelmina W. Witchy-Poo. It's just like the kind of children programming that they don't really make anymore. And I think this is, again, a great show. If you can't bring your kids to the Tuesday the 18th show of Abbott and Costello double feature, bring your kids to the Thursday the 20th show. Watch Pufnstuf. It's going to be a weird, weird time.
I mean, there's a lot of really nice, pleasant Technicolor scenery in this movie that people are going to enjoy. The witches are really funny. There's multiple witches in this movie, not just Witchy Poo. There's let's see, there's Witch Hazel, that's Mama Cass, who sings like a catchy song in this movie. There's the Boss Witch. And it's funny because the movie, this was my first exposure to this. It begins with like a warning from Witchy Poo, and almost like, look what they did to me. And it's like sort of like the story is like told from her perspective. Like, she thinks you're gonna be like pro Witchy Poo, like after watching this movie, in which she tries to like cook and eat Pufnstuf in this council of witches that kind of reminded me actually of like the witches, like the Roald Dahl.
Yeah, the Roald Dahl. It's kind of that same era of like British witch material.
They're bad though. They're committing like acts of terrorism on the Pufnstuf town. They're like
Yeah.
dropping bombs on them. But the witches are really funny. They're chisme witches. They're
Yeah,
on the
they
phone,
like to gossip.
like
Yeah,
gossiping about other things in witchdom.
Yeah, it's just, that's like what I mean though. It's like, it has plot, but then it has story. And it's just, I don't know, this is just like one of the special movies that I don't really know when this gets played. I don't know who else besides the Cinema Club is going to be playing Pufnstuf.
No,
And that's why it's a special screening.
It's a rare screening, and I think Sid Croft is aware of it. I saw that he commented on the Instagram, like someone must have sent it to him, and he is still living. I believe he's 95 years old, and he was like, wow, I didn't know about this. So it's cool that, I don't know if that's an endorsement, but at least he is aware of it. So
That's awesome. So again, that is on Thursday the 20th at 7:30 p.m. And you're going to leave the theater saying, what was that? I need to know more. Now for Friday the 21st at 7:30 p.m., we have some more classic movies with Dangerous with co-hit Alice Adams. First on the double billing is Dangerous. Now this, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but this co-hit is part of the Academy series that you guys are doing, correct?
That's right. This is for the Oscars of 1936, which would have been the 8th Academy Awards and the first year in which they were referred to as the Oscars. So we've been enjoying this game of showing a winner of an award along with a potential nominee and sort of letting the audience decide which they liked better. And last week we showed Suspicion and Ball of Fire with Joan Fontaine and Barbara Stanwyck, and I think people really loved Barbara Stanwyck's performance in Ball of Fire. And if you're keeping up with this, I have been enjoying doing a little poll on Instagram as well, the day that we're doing these screenings where people can vote on their favorite performance and try to play along.
In Dangerous, it's directed by Alfred E. Green and it stars, obviously, Betty Davis. And then the other female lead is Margaret Lindsay. And the man in the movie is, I'm going to mispronounce this probably, Franchot Tone. And this movie is all about Franchot's character. He's engaged to Margaret Lindsay. And he's kind of out one night and he overhears these fellow socialites talking. And he's kind of like, I don't know how I would describe him. He's like a working man. And Margaret Lindsay's character has been like supporting him and like getting him on his feet and going. And while he is at dinner, he overhears this group of guys that he is with talking about Betty Davis's character, who is this kind of actress who is known to be cursed. No one wants to touch her because, one, she's an alcoholic, and so they can't ensure the productions, the stage work. And two, every production she goes on, it just something terrible happens. But Franchot's character has been gripped by her ever since he was a young boy, and he's just been totally inspired by her. So he feels the need to kind of track her down, and it coincides with when he discovers her at the restaurant one night and she's too drunk and she can't pay her tab, so he pays it for her, and instead of putting her in the wagon, which they call it, to go to the jail to go sober up for the night, he actually has a taxi take her to his house, to his second home. And he tells his fiance, hey, I'm just gonna go away for the weekend, and she trusts him unequivocally, and so she doesn't even ask, what are you doing? She just lets him go. And he goes and he helps sober up Betty Davis. And magically, when she's sober, they kind of fall in love. Or do they? Like, Betty Davis's character is kind of this, hence the title, dangerous actress. And you're never really quite sure if she actually loves him or if she doesn't, or if she's just using him, kind of in the way that addicts do. And Franchot kind of turns his back on Margaret Lindsay and falls in love with Betty Davis in order to get a production going. Or does he? There's a lot of like, will they, won't they in this movie. The two female characters end up saying a lot of the same lines about the man, kind of showing they're on two separate sides, but they feel the same way. It's an interesting movie. Now, Alice Adams, on the other hand, we have George Stevens directing. George Stevens directed movies like and Swing Time and Woman of the Year, which also stars Katharine Hepburn. But other people might know him from his documentary on Nazi concentration camps, which was actually produced and presented at the Nuremberg trials as evidence. Like, he went there with a lot of these filmmakers and directors, especially comedy directors, during World War II were kind of sent to the front lines, and they were the ones that showed what actually was happening. And they kind of came back and they were never the same, and their filmmaking all changed. It's a really interesting phenomenon to watch comedy directors before and after World War II. But in Alice Adams specifically, Katharine Hepburn is starring against Freddie McMurray, who I will know from Double Indemnity because that's like one of my favorite noir films. And Katharine Hepburn is my all-time favorite leading lady.
Really?
I love her. Yeah, I love her so much because, I mean, Matt, you'll know, I also love Star Trek, and I love Captain Catherine Janeway, which they based her character partly on Katharine Hepburn.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she the character itself has that mid-Atlantic, that transatlantic accent, which is not a real accent. And when I was a kid, I actually tried to teach myself that accent so that I could sound like Katharine Hepburn. I love her so much. I think she plays the most interesting characters. Her relationship, like on and off screen with Spencer Tracy, is fascinating to me. I love all the work that she does with Cary Grant. But again, this one is with Fred McMurray. from Double Indemnity. Okay, Matt, now that I've gotten into like my whole love for like classic cinema actors and actresses, because I mentioned Cary Grant up the wazoo last week. Now I'm on Katharine Hepburn. I have to ask, do you have like a favorite classic movie star?
It's kind of a cliche answer, but I probably have to say Bela Lugosi. I just love seeing him in pretty much anything, not even just his main horror movies, but anytime he would pop up in another film like The Raven or even like an Ed Wood production. I'm a big fan of just his expressiveness and his face and his entire body of work.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Katharine Hepburn. Like literally, I have a few directors that I go through their filmography, but Katharine Hepburn is really the only actress that I do that with. I own like 15 or 20 of her movies. I'm obsessed. Even if I don't like the movie, I love Katharine Hepburn. So in Alice Adams, she is her character is part of a working class family. They kind of describe them as like a lower middle class, and her father and her brothers are all content being in this echelon of society. However, her and her mother are not. And no matter how embarrassing it is, they want to climb the social ladder. And Katharine Hepburn's character meets Fred McMurray's character, and she falls in love with him, and he's kind of well to do. So she and her mother plan a dinner to impress him. And by God, will it work? Won't it work? We don't know. You're going to have to watch. But there's a lot of like uncomfortable moments in this movie, but Katharine Hepburn just shines. It's just, she's amazing. I always love her. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup and pairing between Bette Davis and Katharine Hepburn. And we're going to have to see if the Academy was correct. Now, on Saturday the 22nd at 7:30 p.m., Matt, there is a movie that you have been dying to program, and when I saw that it finally made its way onto the calendar, I was really happy for you. Tell me about The Legend of Hillbilly John.
I have been waiting to talk about this one. I have been so excited for this showing. I think that it's probably my pick of the month. That doesn't mean that it is the best movie of the month. That honor would have to go to High Diddle Diddle. But in terms of just like Discovery Cinema, when I discovered this movie, I felt like a prospector who had just skimmed for gold. If you didn't know this about me, I also work at a video store called Be Kind Video. Gala did know this about me. And people bring me tapes there all the time to sell and to trade. And, you know, sometimes I'll just put them out and sell them. And in this case, this was a fairly expensive tape that I got in a pile of tapes. So I didn't really watch it. And I just wanted to test it for a buyer who wanted to make sure that it was good before spending a good chunk of change on it. And so I popped it in. And when I popped it in, this movie that I'd never heard of, this New World Pictures tape, I was immediately transfixed by this rhythmic drumming, this strange song, and it begins with this very strange song over this like title sequence, this like folk music, which is sung by the great Hoyt Axton. That's the dad, by the way, from Gremlins. He sings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he sings the opening song, which is called "The Devil," and then the first like moment of the movie is a funny guy in a top hat walking around the woods who says the devil is a joker and he don't want you alive. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is this crazy movie? So I made good on my deals, because I always do, and I sold it anyway, and I immediately regretted selling it off. And then I had to go buy another copy, which is a cut box, and you'll see pictures of it. But I became kind of obsessed with this movie, and I felt like I had kind of rediscovered it. So this movie was based on a series of books by Manly Wade Wellman, who was famous for his Appalachian set horror stories, and he would write for Weird Tales magazine. And he was from North Carolina, and a lot of his stories were rooted in this North Carolina folklore. And the thing that he was most famous for writing was this series of stories about Silver John, aka John the Balladeer. And Silver John was a character in the Manly Wade Wellman books who was a Korean War vet and a descendant of John the Baptist. And he cleanses the hills of North Carolina with white magic, which he derives from plucking the strings of his guitar, silver guitar strings. So it's very, very folklorish. And in the movie, we see these people who are actually sort of clear cutting, as it would tie into clear cut, an entire section of the forest. They're deforesting. And this guy, Hillbilly John, sort of wanders in and wants to prevent them from doing that. And he is transported back in time by the devil in the mountains. This is a very strange and often murky movie, and it's an amalgamation of two different Silver John stories. One is called The Desric on Yandro, and one is called Oh Ugly Bird. And the bird is a manifestation of the devil, and it is a crazy stop motion looking dragon, which is on the cover of, or bird rather, which is on the cover of the tape. And I also put a graphic of it on the calendar. And this is just a very strange, hippie folklore movie. It's from director John Newland, who did a lot of classic TV in this era, like I Love Lucy. He did a Star Trek original series episode called Errand of Mercy, which you might be familiar with.
Would you consider The Legend of Hillbilly John to be lost media?
Well, you know what's funny? It kind of was, and I was like, wow, somebody needs to put this on a Blu-ray or something, or get this out there. And as it turns out, it's actually in volume 2 of Severin's All the Hanspears box set, which I have referenced now continuously, which is the Compendium of Folk Horror. And we showed now 3 movies from volume 1, Allison's Birthday, Eyes of Fire, and Clear Cut. And I didn't know this was in volume 2 until Phil Blankenship told me that it was, under a different title, Who Fears the Devil, which
Wow.
Was the compendium of Silver John stories as it was originally released. So it's very strange. It's out there now on Blu-ray for people to rediscover, but I didn't know about that Blu-ray when I first wanted to showcase this movie. And I'm very excited for people to see it because, again, it's just like this hippie guy who is doing battle with the devil in the mountains. And who plays this guy? The guy that plays John. It is Severin Darden. And you probably know him as Governor Culp from Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I think you would really like this movie. It's just has this like weirdness and this charm to it. The music is so catchy. Like you're gonna go out and listen to the Hoyt Axton movie like as soon as you watch this movie. And another tie to the Cinema Club is that the original choice to play John was Arlo Guthrie from Alice's Restaurant.
From Alice's Restaurant. Well, that's interesting, though. I mean, again, as I say every episode, it's all connected. I think this is going to be a really special screening because even though it is now being released on Blu-ray and people at home can see it, I don't know if I've ever heard of this getting screened anywhere. This might be one of the first times.
I have never heard of a screening of this movie. I've never heard anyone talk about this movie ever. And now, like, coincidentally, there's a Blu-ray of it. But the fact that there is a Blu-ray of it is sort of what is allowing us to show it, because that means it is part of the AGFA, the American Genre Film Archive catalog. So that means that they have the theatrical screening rights for this movie. So maybe if there is a 35 millimeter print or a 16 millimeter print of this movie kicking around somewhere, it can screen in a larger theater someday. But that's just sort of a peek behind the curtain of how stuff is licensed and how we get to show some of this stuff.
Well, that sounds like it's going to be a great night. Again, that is on Saturday, the 22nd at 7:30 p.m. That's this week at the Video Archive Cinema Club. Remember, patrons get this episode one day early for free over at patreon.com/videoarchives. Plus, we have a weekly newsletter that comes out on Mondays with pictures of all the boxes and any memorabilia. And also, Matt posts all of the boxes over on the Instagram, which is Video Archives Club. So you get to see lots of pictures and stories about all these movies. So for those box enthusiasts, make sure you also follow the Instagram. If you'd like to get your tickets to any of these shows, you can do so at
VistaTheaterHollywood.com.
And as always, follow them on Instagram at
Video Archives Club
for updates on showtimes. Okay, guys, see you at the movies.
See you later.
This calendar episode was produced by the Video Archives podcast and hosted by Gala, Avary, and Matt Landsman. Find even more of Video Archives on our Patreon, patreon.com/videoarchives. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved.